Setting your motivation, so to make sure we adopt the right kind of motivation for this kind of course to make the most out of it. And then we'll do some prayers, not a lot. First, the refuge prayer. So don't worry, you're not really like taking refuge and do the whole, but basically just saying, I take refuge in the sense of like whatever you want to do when you say the prayer, as in like, I trust myself, I open myself up to these teachings to learn something new. So I take refuge, therefore, in the person who taught this, the Buddha. Then I take refuge in the Dharma, in the teachings, and in those who kind of help me, the Sangha. The Sangha help me in teaching, learning about the Dharma. So you can actually totally take refuge, or you take it in a different way, whatever is most appropriate for yourself. And of course then you generate bodhicitta, the wish to either become fully enlightened for the benefit of others, or to do the best that you can to be of greatest benefit to yourself and others. So it's up to you how you take this prayer, but try and think of the meaning of those words. And then the 4 immeasurables, which are very straightforward. We wish for sentient beings to be happy, to be free from suffering, and so forth. So the words are self-explanatory. Okay? So we'll do this very short prayer, but start with the meditation. Okay. So make sure you're comfortable. So first just focus on the breathing. Being mindful of breathing in and out. And letting go of any destructive or disruptive thoughts. And then try to generate the proper kind of motivation for this course. To think that I will spend this time, those 2 days, make an effort to learn something new, to get a better understanding of the working of my own mind. In order to make changes to my mind, in order to reduce aversion, jealousy, anger, and so forth. To replace them patience, generosity, love, compassion, etc. In order to become a kinder person, to become more satisfied, and more peaceful. In order to be of greater benefit to myself and other living beings. And eventually to attain the awakened state and the insights of a Buddha. So with this motivation, let's recite the prayers in Hebrew. Well, tomorrow we'll do it in Tibetan.
Buddha, Dharma, Vakilai, באמצעות המצבורים של השפעה לדרמה, להוסיף בודהיות ואלוהי ליצורים הנודדים. בבודה, בדרמה ובקהילה העילאית, אבקש מקלט עד להערה. באמצעות המצבורים של הקשבה לדרמה, להוסיף בודהיות כדי להוליד ליצורים הנודדים. בבודה, בדרמה ובקהילה העילאית, אבקש מקלט עד להערה. באמצעות המצבורים של הקשבה לדרמה, להוסיף בודהיות כלהוליד ליצורים הנודדים. לו יזכו כל בעלי התודעה באושר ובגורמי האושר. לו ייפרדו כל בעלי התודעה מסבל ובגורמי הסבל. לו לעולם לא ייפרדו כל בעלי התודעה מאושר וטול כאב. לו יפתחו כל בעלי התודעה את מידת ההשתוות ללא משוא פנים של התקשרות ושל סלידה.
Okay. Wow. Actually, when I had it on my computer, it was only 29 pages. Now it's 67. So a lot of work. No one will get bored, trust me. Okay, but just before we start, a few words. First of all, about the silence. So, as you know, there's going to be silence, which some of you may not be used to, some of you may be used to. And I've been asked in the past to say a little bit about this. So I have my notes for Israel. It's called Israel, Remember. And they're different points. So someone asked me in the past, because of that I noted down, remind of why the silence. So I went through my notes before, came back to that. Basically, this is like a study retreat. It's like a retreat, a place where you get away from your everyday life and you focus on the Dharma, by learning about new ideas, meditating upon them. And we have these sessions, like when we get together, those are kind of like the retreat sessions where you're required to be very skeptical of what you hear, analyze, reflect on it, of course, generate questions and doubts, very good. I mean, Israel, no worry about that. So there'll be doubts and questions, which is great. But then actually in a retreat, the most important time, it's not the session, it is the in-between session. That is considered to be the most important time. Now, if during that time you sit around and you chat and, exchange news for your family, your friend, yeah, well, it's nice, but it doesn't really serve the purpose of making the in-between session time the most important time. Because what you usually do in a retreat is you digest what you did during the sessions. So whether it's a study retreat or a retreat where you only meditate, it doesn't matter. You utilize the in-between time to digest and take whatever you learn to a deeper level. So what I would like you to do is whatever you learn in each session, don't think of it as like, oh, my neighbor's mind. Oh yeah, my neighbor's mind has an object. Oh, my neighbor has a lot of anger. Yeah, I recognize that. That's nice, but mostly to apply it to your own mind. Like while I'm talking, all right, is this true for myself? Is this true right now? Did this happen? We have time. I mean, I can talk to you and think about when I do my laundry. So if I can do that, you can listen to me and also reflect at the same time. We can do that. So therefore, when I talk about certain ideas, don't leave them just outside of yourself, but try and think, does this apply to myself? Is this in any way true or not? And this you can only do to a limited degree because some of what I tell you may be difficult and you need to concentrate fully. But then you have the opportunity, when you're in the in-between time, to go over this again. And I may ask you some questions. So like homework, as in like in-between session work. So to do certain things. And you'll be so busy, you no time to talk. So then it's better to make it silence and to try and keep it to the best of your ability to make the fullest time of it. Because we only have 6 hours every day of you having to listen to me talking. So there's all this other time left, of course, doing meditation and in between sessions. So this is why it's a good idea to keep silent. So let's try that. It's only 2 days. All right. Of course, yes, please. Pardon?
What would be the best use of our time in between sessions?
Oh.
To your recommendation?
Oh, well, I'll tell you after this class or after this session. After each session, I'll give you like a little job to do. As in like, for instance, today we speak about the object of mind. We start with this. So watch the object, recognize what objects you have of your own mind as you walk for dinner or breakfast, what have you. Right? And then I explain it and to be basically mindful of what you've learned to now observe. Is it true or not? That's basically the main job. But I'll be more specific towards the end of class. And if I forget, please remind me. Okay, great. All right, so that's the first thing I wanted to say. So about the silence. Also, please come to all the sessions. Okay? Why? Because if you come to all the sessions, it benefits everyone else. It's really weird. It's just a group energy. If someone is missing, we kind of pick up on it subconsciously. Oh, something is missing. Because like all of us, we are this union now. Like we're like a group, all working together. This is also why in the Tibetan tradition, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and not just in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, in other Buddhist traditions, monks and nuns come together to do prayers together. They can do it on their own. They could do it on their own. Honestly, why do we get together? But there's something about this group thing, like everyone doing it together, participating. It has an influence on everyone else's mind. So therefore, in the monasteries and the nunneries, they require the monks and nuns to always come because it helps everyone else to be more focused and to be more present because it's complete. Everyone is there. And so this is also true for us as a group. But there are like gaps in between, and some are there and some are not there. It has an influence on us, however subconscious it is. So not just for your own sake, but for the sake of everyone else. Try to be there during every session. It gives everyone else also the motivation to continue and be present. And of course to be very critical. Whatever I say, and this is how we were trained, to always have in the back of your mind, nah, that can't be true. There must be some, right? This kind of attitude, we were literally trained that way. Always have that critical kind of person in the back of your mind. Nah, I'm not sure that's true. Maybe the Buddha got it wrong, or he just said so in order to challenge us. So to always have that in the back of your mind. Don't believe anything you hear. And in that way, your understanding just gets better, and you take it in a different way versus just accepting what you hear. Okay, great. That's actually all I wanted to say to start. Okay, great. So, I better start because... Right, so you have this little booklet here, which some years ago I put this together. Vada did a great job to actually putting in something very proper. I'm very impressed. But anyway, so I put this together some years ago, and then I went over it again, like a month or two ago, and made a few changes, a few adjustments. And the reason I put this together is that usually when you study this topic on the mind, you study it from the point of view of a philosophical system that is slightly different, a Buddhist philosophical system called the Satantrika, that is slightly different from the highest school point of view, from the Prasangika school point of view. It's just, that's how it was set forth traditionally. So you learn about the mind and about this philosophical system. If you have a lot of time, that's fine. If you have lots of time, like learning about this philosophical system, plus on the mind, great. However, we don't have that much time. You know, we have these few days here, and so I thought, just do it right from the point of view of the high school point of view, because eventually you'll learn about this anyway. All right, so this is slightly different. There's slight differences, not that many. And I also thought to include a few aspects here that are not traditionally always included in this topic, but that I thought are interesting and a part of the explanation of the mind. And as we go along, I'll mention those. So let's just start. You have the table of content on the first page, like the cover page, the inside of the cover page, and it continues on the last page, which is great, no waste of paper. So, starting off, obviously, with definition of the mind, definition of awareness. So the mind is not really defined as much, but then you have different words in Tibetan and in Sanskrit, different words that refer to the same thing. Mind, awareness, consciousness. We don't necessarily, in English, those words are not necessarily in everyday kind of usage, used interchangeably, but that's just how they have to be adjusted. So, awareness just means something that is aware of its object. Consciousness is that which is conscious of its object. And then mind. Okay? So, since there are three words, at least in Tibetan, we needed to find three equivalents in English. And you may wonder, why just not use one word? It's complicated enough. The whole explanation on Buddhism, it's complicated enough. I mean, just the meaning. Why do you also need lots of different words to explain the same thing? You may notice in Tibetan Buddhism, it's very funny. Like, you have so many words for impermanent. You have many words for mind. You have many words for saying the self doesn't exist the way it appears. Different words for that. And it's like, it's hard enough to understand the meaning. Why have these different words? But of course, every word means something slightly, has like a slightly different way of describing the same thing. And so our understanding gets fuller if we have different words to describe it. Right? The classic example they give is, for instance, they talk of the moon. In Tibetan, the word moon, dawa. So if you know any Tibetans, there are lots of Tibetans called dawa. Their name is actually moon. So moon, And then there's another word, Sisirchen, the magnificent one, the I don't know how else to say, magnificent, or the radiant, or the radiant one. Because the moon is kind of radiant, right? So moon doesn't tell you much. And then there's another one, it's the rabbit possessor. Because if you look at the moon, it's probably easier to Google it. Just go Tibetan moon rabbit. And then there's a drawing, it kind of gives you the outlines in the moon. So trust me, when you do this, you can no longer see the man in the moon. You see the rabbit from now on. Because you can actually see the outlines of a rabbit. So that's the rabbit possessor. And the whole story is about how the name came to be. Anyway, the stories are just stories. But it gives you a sense of the rabbit, the moon having an image of a rabbit there. Okay? And then radiant. So different words being used, giving you a different sense of moon. Okay, moon is not that important to understand, but mind, definitely, so important to understand. And so having more words helps us to identify the mind better. And it's really funny how Buddhism and science have come really closer, have become much closer together over the years. Whereas 400 years ago, when science started newly, what we now call modern science, when that kind of developed, how the science was, how the mind was very conveniently left out. No one was interested in the mind. Why? Because it's obviously subjective. So scientists were not interested in the subjective world, they were interested in the objective world. So who was interested in the mind? I don't want to know about the mind, I want to know about the objective reality. I think at that time, because it was still very much influenced by Judeo-Christian traditions, they talked about the God view. So not my view, not your view, God view. So science was interested in that kind of view of reality. Makes sense, right? Kind of makes sense if I want to know. So leave out the mind, totally forgetting though, that when we try to understand something, we can only do it by using our mind. Like, how can you get an understanding of reality as like the external environment, the stars, physics, biology, etc., without using your mind to measure, to count, to weigh, etc.? It's bizarre. So in the end, nowadays scientists understand that in the end you use your own mind to get a subjective view of reality. I mean, what is that objective view? Like something you don't perceive? Or is it scientific understanding? Is that gained through our mind as a tool to gain an understanding? Well, it's pretty clear that it's the latter. And nowadays there's more and more interest also of modern science of the understanding of the mind, because that is the tool that allows us to understand reality. Right? So Buddhism and science have come quite close because of the understanding that such a bird's view, as they sometimes say, like a bird's view, like an objective view of reality, it doesn't work. It's still our subjective view. But that's just in terms of gaining knowledge, gaining understanding. But much more important, in terms of what we want the most, what we all want is to be happy. We don't want to have problems. And whatever that means is individually different, but we all agree that we just want to be happy and content. But what is it that makes us happy and content? Being healthy, having a certain financial standing, our kids being all right, all that we consider to be happiness, but it's actually the mind that interprets that as being happy and pleasant. It's not in and of itself, because otherwise, if we had similar experiences, we would need to have the same degree of happiness, and that's not true. And when things go wrong, it's again the mind that interprets that to be an unhappy state or an unpleasant state. If we interpret it as a challenge, as an opportunity to grow, well, that's what it becomes. So basically, the external environment, which we consider that to be determining our state of happiness, etc., well, that's only one of the conditions. Depends on the mind to interpret something, making it pleasant or unpleasant. And so it's really totally up to our own mind whether we're happy or not. Now that sounds like, wow, great news. I mean, I'm not dependent on anything else any longer. Well, I'm not saying it's that extreme, but if we learn to get to know our mind better, the working of our mind, and also that we actually have multiple personalities. I mean, it's bizarre, the kind of minds that pop up at different times, right? One moment we're really well and happy and pleased, and a moment later, suddenly we're grumpy and moody and upset about everything that happens. And then the next moment we're kind of in between, we don't really care. And all these different awarenesses popping up, but we're not aware of them. Why? Because we're so preoccupied with the objects of the mind. We're less aware, we're not really aware of the experiencing entity, but we're aware of the objects of the mind. We're so busy that we don't perceive what's actually having these experiences. We're not actually aware of how these experiences arise, etc. So this text here gives us the opportunity, at the very least, to get a better understanding of that. And to take control of our own life. I mean, it sounds too good to be true, and it's not anything. It's not like after 2 days you walk away from here and, whoa, you're totally in control. It'd be lovely if that was the case, but of course it takes a little longer than that. But that's one of the first steps. And of course, from a Buddhist point of view, if you take it further towards liberation, enlightenment, etc., I mean, without an understanding of the mind, you won't understand Buddhism. So this is really the foundation of everything. All right. And so it says at the very beginning here, so you'll see some parts of it, I'll read through it, but I don't want to just read it because it's a lot of material. So some parts of it I may just explain, but using this as the basis. And it would be helpful if you could read in advance, or later on, or spend some time to read through it. And of course, this is only giving you like a glimpse into this vast topic. And if you have the time, I give you a number of names of books that you could read from then onwards. But hopefully what you learn here gives you some understanding. For instance, when I first became a nun, I found this book in the Tushita library. I was in Dharamsala in Tushita, and I found this book called Mind in Tibetan Buddhism. So, wow, that's what I need to read. So I got that book out of the library, and I started reading, and I was like, I don't understand anything. It's like, it's impossible. I remember thinking, now I got this precious book. I love the title. I love the picture. It's exactly what I want to know. But I read it and I don't understand a thing. What's going on? And so then, when I started learning about this, not necessarily in the not learning Tibetan initially, just in with English courses. I started off with doing some courses, and then someone explained it, and another person did, and it kind of started to unravel, as in started to become clearer. And later on, I read it, and I was like, what is there not to understand? But I remember that time, I was so happy I had that book, but I didn't understand. So hopefully, this will serve as some basis that later on you can take that book and actually read it and understand it. Because it has some ideas that are really weird. Other ideas are easy, and some ideas are just, we're not used to them. But I always feel confident teaching it, because I always feel, if I can understand that, anyone can. Seriously. I'm not more intelligent than anyone else. I'm totally average. So if I can understand it, anyone can. Right, so they're giving me the confidence to actually teach this. Okay. But, so as this booklet here starts off to say, well, this understanding, the understanding of the nature, the characteristics, the functioning of the mind, that's the basis of Buddhist philosophy and of course practice. And please don't differentiate between philosophy and practice. We like to do that, to differentiate, and we can conceptually, but we shouldn't. Because really the philosophy is that which we should practice. Okay. And as the Buddha has said in the text called Dhammapada, that all things are preceded by the mind, they're led by the mind, they're created by the mind. Okay. So that's already telling us something very profound in Buddhism. It gives you already an idea of one of the most important ideas in Buddhism. there's no objective reality. It's all the mind. Okay. So,